You know, for those of all traditions, astaghfirullah. But you know what I'm saying. Metaphorically, I gotta make that. You know what I'm saying. Work at making that that red hot connection. You know what I'm saying. Red hot connection with this pitchfork red hot connection 7 times a day. And that's real talk. And I break down the 7 times a day concept is this, or I mean 5 times a day, as you need to give 10% of the day to Allah. And that's what that and for me it's self-reflection because at the end of the day you are God and God is you. Or God is the all in all and or Allah is the all in all and the unity of Allah is the unity with the all in all is the goal of every single Muslim man, woman, and child by way of study, and that's the study of self, and the study of self on a micro level, on a macro level, on an individual level, and a group level, in a microcosmic from a microcosmic viewpoint and from a macrocosmic viewpoint. I, self, Lord, and Master. That's what Islam is. Islam is the mastery of self. That's why it's the submission. It's the peace. It's and the peace comes through the submission to nature, to the natural being that you were created to be, and that you can only find that being through way of self study. At least that's my interpretation of Islam, or my my interpretation of Islam based upon and that's derived from the parameters set by the literature in relationship to Islam. I'm not making up some outside literature to justify how I see Islam, and that's why I refer to my particular cultural view, my values, my principles as Islam because they're based in this philosophy called Islam. Now, the Islam I practice is far closer to Sufi Islam than it is Sunni Islam. But Sunni just means traditional. And what is Sunna? And you know what I'm saying? Sufi is a form of Sunna. Sufi is Sunna. So, you know what I'm saying? It's just the scientific aspect of the science that is Islam. Islam is not just a religion. And I don't want to exclude the fact that the deen is a integral part of Islam, but it is not just confined to a religion. It's a political system. It's a way of life. It's a science primarily, and it's a science in relationship to man's understanding of how he is to achieve equilibrium with his environment. That's what true, and that purity of Islam has been, diluted by the current manifestation or the current view or the current practice of Islam, and the current perception of Islam, even by those who are practitioners of Islam. So that's kind of really what I want to get into. You know what I'm saying? As far as where I'm at right now, as far you know what I'm saying, the curriculum or the basis of a lot of my, you know what I'm saying, because it's and I'm just saying that's what I live. So when I'm talking about X Life Speaks, and I'm talking about who I am, and you know what I'm saying, what my mission statement is at its very foundation is Islam. It's the guiding principle, you know what I'm saying, which is my culture, which is true indeed. That principle in which I live by is a living principle, which is God. You know, the principle in the living, or is God's proper name is Allah. And in the living, it's it's in the living, it's in my living, it's Islam. But in its living principle, it's Allah. It's the all in all. It's to understand the nature. And I mean, and I can read this out of Gnostic. I mean, not out of Gnostic, but out of Gnostic scriptures too, but out of Sufi scriptures, of the Sufi philosophy. My philosophy is well in line with past Sufi philosophies. And that's intentional and unintentional. It's why I've chosen to view myself as a Sufi Muslim, realizing that is the most accurate interpretation of or description of the form of Islam which I practice and have been drawn to practice. An African American or a North American tradition or Al-Marqadeshian tradition. of Islam, based in, African shamanism and mysticism and ancestral worship, evolving into a monotheist God viewpoint. So, and then, our monolithic cultural God viewpoint from a neuropsychiatric that's neither here nor there, but that's my point of view, that, what I'm saying, from the priesthood standpoint, that it was supposed to be utilized as a neuropsychiatric form of group therapy, based upon the Assyrian resurrection. This is what it's called. I don't know why, cyclical or whatever the fuck I was calling it. But it's it's meditations and daily prayer, and daily meditations and stuff associated with the cycle that is derived, or that is, derived from the natural cycle by way of, by the ancient Egyptian adepts. That's within the metaphor. Within the Assyrian metaphor, the Ashar set metaphor, the day of coming, the day of coming forth metaphor, is the Book of the Dead. The metaphor in relationship to the Assyrian resurrection is what the actual book is about, and he breaks it down, and taking it from the ancient text, breaks it down into this cyclical, the cyclical chart that you utilize, that you base your daily meditation on the seasonal shifts, and it's really informative, and it's really, I've attempted to, he has a very rigid form, and I've taken the form and kind of personalized it, made it personal for me. And I don't necessarily suggest you do the same or not do the same or whatever. And I see that in relationship to maintaining the red hot connection too, is like understanding that there are seasonal shifts, and that your psyche is affected by those seasonal shifts. And there are certain practices and ceremonies and so forth that have a psychological effect, a positive psychological effect on the participant. And that's what the purpose of these rituals and so forth, and why there are specific rituals that have to do with gatherings and in specific periods of the season, because of that neuropsychiatric therapeutic what am I looking for? Therapeutic let me think of a good word there. Therapeutic qualities of the activities. There you go. So the therapeutic qualities of the activities. So that was the original high priest concept. The original high priest, African high priest, understood from their antiquated scientific viewpoint that Africans were pretty pan-atheist. Anthropologists, religious anthropologists will attest to the fact that they were pretty pan-atheist in their view. They didn't necessarily believe nor disbelieve in their gods or goddesses or figures. They just knew that this is the way that they perceived, and I'm talking about the priesthood, the higher priesthood. This is the way in which they perceived it, or man perceived their reality, and therefore they utilize it in order to benefit the tribe, to scare off, bad spirits and so forth and so on. And in a sense, they did so because they shifted the psyche of the individual that was causing the so-called bad spirit and brought upon the so-called good spirits. So it's a negative psyche versus a positive psyche in this, and I see that, and that's the thing about it. There has to be scientists involved. Just like there were scientists of antiquity involved. There's got to be using primitive scientific method. Now we have advanced scientific method, and that advanced scientific method within the evolutionary process, shamans have, and sentinels and so forth and so on have evolved to have certain, capacities and aptitude in the sciences so that they can, act as actual, priesthood. And that's a product of evolution. That's not like, oh, God did it. But then again, it fulfills that metaphor. But then you really can't get that if you don't have a broad comprehension of science, and everybody is just not. If everybody was like engaged in scientific comprehension, dude, nothing will get done. So nature is efficient, so it's going to expend its energy efficiently, knowing that we are social animals. Our society needs some type of So it gives us the tools. Nature gives us the tools like it does any other animal in relationship to, or living system in relationship to, the capacity of that. And then when there's a certain level of responsibilities and with human beings that we've been given this gift or curse of volition, that we can choose to or not to think, but there are consequences, or there's an effect, a cause and effect in relationship to thinking and not thinking. And that's just the reality of nature. And that human beings would have to come to a certain, would have to evolve to a point in time in which they could come to that awareness and share that awareness with one another. That we have a responsibility to think as far as adaptability, because nature has to nature is equitable. So it gives every species the opportunity not to adapt, the opportunity to be maladaptive. However, it persuades you, again, this is the choice of life and death. I can bring it down to your literature, to your biblical literature. These are the choices of life and death. Now, dude, you can choose life, you can choose death. Now, I would prefer you choose life. And that's for in my household, we would follow the Lord. That whole spiel right there is the same in relationship to the way that nature. That's amoral. That's an amoral viewpoint from whatever creator would say that onto his creation. Wasn't moral. He's like, I don't care. Look, I've given you the opportunity. The fact that he's giving you an opportunity to do bad and to do good means that they're amoral. Because if they were moral, they would only give you the ability to do what was moral. There wouldn't be any choice. There wouldn't be any free will. Because that would be counter to that particular psyche, the particular psyche of that entity. And see, we don't apply logic to this God because he's a logical God, even though his son, his understanding is logic. So. Which was with him in the beginning, the word, logic. And we want to make it this word, this written word, and this moral law, but it's not a moral law. It's an amoral law. The biblical accounts speak of it. Wickedness is in the city. I placed it there. And if there's good in it, if something was built in it, so on and so forth, that's amoral. That's an amoral determination. I'm going to allow for choice between good and evil is amoral. So again, and this is not an argument for or against a God. It's just a statement about reality in relationship to the fact that, one, this universe has all the hallmarks of being consciously created. And that the conscious creator, so this is why you're in the middle here, me in the middle, and that whatever conscious creator is not supernatural, is not moral, it is not personal. Because they don't do anything personally to any individual. It's not about you. That's narcissism. It's all about me. It's not about you. It's about the natural progression of things within these parameters set by something that predated you. That necessarily was not creating what it created with you in mind. And that's the problem. You know what I'm saying? In the last days, man will be motherfucking lovers of themselves. Narcissistic. So narcissistic that they think everything is about them. That human beings think that this universe was created specifically for them. It's crazy. Okay.